Hello, everyone. Welcome to our September 1st coffee shop webinar. We're going to give everybody just about a minute to get logged on here today. So if you are logged on, please give us a quick shout out or wave in the chat box just to let us know that you can hear us and you can see us. All right, good. We're getting hand raises, so thank you very much for letting us know. We want to make sure that we don't get 15 minutes into a webinar and think that everybody can't hear us. So because we are at about 2:01, I want to go ahead and get started today. Again, thank you to everyone for being here. My name is Amy Wong, and I'm the president and founder of .org Solutions. We are a marketing, PR, and fundraising firm located here in Akron, Ohio. And this is, gosh, probably our 7th coffee shop webinar that we've put on since the beginning of June. And these webinars are actually designed to help those in the nonprofit space do their jobs a little bit better and provide some insight from some professionals in the field who can just teach you some things that may help you navigate some of this craziness that we're dealing with COVID right now. The coffee shop is part of our overall .org Cafe professional development series, which is a free series that we are building out and we'll be launching more components of over the next couple of months. But really the idea behind Cafe and coffee shop in particular is to just be very informative but relatable. We know that you don't have a whole lot of time on your hands, but you really need information that you can use and put to work right away. So these are certainly very easy bits and bytes to put into action. And we hope that you leave with information today that you can use in your job right away. So for those of you who have been on past sessions, today may look a little different to you. So in the past, what we've done is more of a Q&A format with our speakers. And today we're going to do a little more of an interactive session. So it's going to be more of a presentation, but we're still going to infuse question and answer into it. Also, it's going to be interactive. So those of you who are on or who have checked your email in the last hour, we did send out a free download to you. And that download is a timeline, an Excel timeline that you can actually build out today as we're talking through the webinar, or you can actually use later on for yourself. So that's just something free that we wanted to be able to send along to you. And it's something that we use actually with our clients quite a bit as we're helping them plan their annual appeals and other fundraising and marketing projects. We are going to have one speaker today, and I'll introduce her in a minute. We are going to have me as a moderator, so there will be times that I may be interjecting and asking Sarah questions along the way. And then we are going to also be moderating the chat box and the Q&A features in the webinar. Only the panelists and the moderator are going to be visible on screen today. So those of you who are joining the webinar, we're not going to be able to see you or hear you. And hopefully you'll continue throughout the hour to see and hear us. If you do run into any technical difficulties, please use the chat box to communicate with us, and we will try to get those issues taken care of, especially if they're on our end. For anybody who submitted questions ahead of time, we'll do our best to address those questions during this session. But again, the chat box will be enabled so we can ask questions. We encourage you actually to ask questions throughout the session. We don't want you to wait and ask a question at the end when the question would probably be better answered right at that time during the webinar. We're also going to leave about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the presentation to go over any other questions that you may have at the end of the webinar. So today's topic is all around planning for your year-end appeal. And so this is actually the third in a 4-part series that we have done that started in August with talking about both data and mailing components of your year-end appeal. Today, we're going to be talking about planning for your year-end appeal and specifically about timelines and actually having plans put into place that you can use. So our presenter today is our key plan maker at .org Solutions. We talk about Sarah and how much she loves plans and building out timelines. Sarah is our Director of Nonprofit Consulting here at .org Solutions. And like many of us that are in the fundraising profession, she never really set out to be a fundraiser. But her first job right out of college was a development assistant, and she's been in the field ever since. She loves working with our nonprofit clients because she really feels like she understands what they want to achieve, but just sometimes just don't know how to get there, and she loves to be able to get them there. She likes to integrate fundraising best practices with the organization's capacity to create process and plans that are usable. She does believe that nonprofits, like all of us here at .org, believe that nonprofits make the world a better place. And from her previous positions to the fantastic clients that she works with now, she learns a little bit more about the world we live in every day. She has a BA in physical education from Mount Union, an MA in organizational leadership from Malone, is a longtime member of the Association of Fundraising Professionals, Northeast Ohio chapter, and she's also a board member of the Northeast Ohio chapter. She loves Mexican food, which we're always good for a few tacos if we're with Sarah, and she loves to read in her spare time. So at this point, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Sarah. And again, as we go along today, go ahead and enter things into the chat box. And if you did not get to your email and were able to download that form, we're actually going to post a link to that interactive form for the planning that you can put, or we're going to put it actually in the chat box so that you can download that as we're going. So with that, Sarah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Right. Thank you so much, Amy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. We are, as Amy said, going to talk about one of my favorite things, which is timelining and planning. The best part about this session is really going to be the ability for you to follow along and work on your timeline as we go. You know, that was really the whole point of what we were hoping to do in this, is to really allow everyone the chance to start filling that timeline out as we went. You will not finish it today. I promise you, you will have to take some extra time after this session, but I'm really hoping that it will be helpful to at least get that started for you now that we're in September. So I will start here. I have a couple slides just to go through. So really one of the things that we talk about here at .org is a goal without a plan is just a wish. So, you know, we always talk about when we're planning, you know, what do we want to do next year? What do we want to accomplish? You know, if we want to raise more for our annual fund, what does that mean? And how are we going to get there? You know, so if you want to raise, let's say, $10,000 more for annual fund, great. But if you don't know how you're going to get there, it really is just a wish. You know, it's just at this point an idea. So until you really start thinking out that plan and using your annual giving plan for that, you know, you're really just not there yet. So what is an annual giving plan? So your annual giving plan really should include measurable goals, objectives, tasks, deadlines, assignments. You know, an annual giving plan really should encompass all of those things throughout the year. You know, so it's not just listing, you know, just this timeline for sure, because you know, it is so much more than just that. The timeline is a part of your annual plan, but it is not your entire annual plan. You know, it should include, your annual plan should include, you know, all of your different giving vehicles, you know, anything that you're doing throughout the year to raise money for your annual fund. That really, all of that is included in your annual giving plan. And you should have goals surrounding each one of those as well. So, you know, if you want to raise some additional funding through some events for your annual giving, you really need to have goals and objectives tied to that. So I'm not going to talk a lot today about your annual giving plan. The timeline really is the meat and potatoes of what this session is going to be about. But I just think it's important to point out that, you know, a timeline and a plan work together, but the plan is not the entire plan itself. So what's really the difference between a plan and a timeline, right? So your plan is going to have all of your activities. So, you know, a good annual fund or annual giving plan should be truly multiple pages long. It probably has 5 or 6 goals. Under those goals are probably 3 or 4 objectives. Under those objectives are then tasks, deadlines, and assignments of when those things are going to be accomplished. So your plan really is the umbrella over everything you're doing for the year to raise funding for your nonprofit. your timeline is just that. It is just a written account of the activities you're going to achieve to try to reach those goals. So the timeline is one piece. I always like to say a timeline is a type of plan, but a plan is not a timeline. So a lot of times when we go in to work with our clients, you know, we ask what's their annual giving plan, and they kind of give us a timeline of, well, you know, January we send out an appeal, April we send out an appeal, September we do our end of year appeal, and that's what they give us as their plan. So that's not really an annual giving plan. That's really more of just a timeline. So when we're talking about the timeline, really, why is the timeline important? And why do I love them so much? You know, it gives you a visual listing of your activities, of what you're going to be doing. It provides transparency and urgency and or emergency for different tasks. So once we get into the actual planning, you may realize that some of the things that need to be accomplished in order to get your end of year appeal out the door may be now an emergency, that they needed to be done in August. You may find out that they need to be done this week, which would be some urgent tasks. And it really just provides that overall idea of what you're doing. It gets the information out of your head. You know, I think a lot of us, especially if we've been doing these jobs for a long time, we just get very used to just doing them. You know, they're just on automatic. So I think having that ability to get that information out of your head and written out allows others to know what you're thinking, and then lets them know too if they have responsibilities. It also, I think, shows you different holes in your planning so that you know exactly kind of where you're at, and you might see something you're missing, a segment of your donors that you might be missing, a segment of marketing that you might be missing, all of those things. You know, it keeps you accountable. I think that when people are assigned specific deadlines, they're much more likely to be successful, especially if you have a large team or multiple people that have to be involved in working on your end of year appeal. You know, being able to list all of those things out in such a way so that people know exactly what is expected of them. I know, especially for me, if there's a timeline listed and I'm next to something, I want to make sure my part's complete. I don't want to be the missing link in the complete line, right? So that everybody else has done their job, but I haven't done mine yet. So I think it just is another way to really keep people accountable. It curbs surprises. You know, if everything's written out, nobody can say, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Or, gosh, you know, we didn't realize that the link that we put in the letter went to an old page for last year's annual appeal until it goes out, right? So it curbs those surprises of, you knew in October that the link needed to be updated to a new form for 2020 so that that link could be then put in the letter, and it doesn't get all the way to the end for someone to click on that link and tell you, hey, this link, you know, says 2019, do you still want me to use it? It fills your holes in thinking, and I think it gives you a bigger picture to think through what you want the appeal to really say and do to your donors. I just think that once you have the time, once you take the time to really fill out this timeline, you'll start to see some areas that you might not have thought about, like updating your website, like, you know, creating social graphics, you know, those things that, gosh, it would have been nice if we would have thought to have some social graphics created based on what the appeal looked like so that we could use it. Or, gosh, I wish I had that graphic, I could put it in the e-newsletter. Things like that. If you write all these things out in the timeline beforehand, I just think it gives you a better opportunity to think through some of those things so that you know what's coming. So what goes in the timeline? I was going to put on this slide everything, just everything. Everything goes in the timeline. But I felt like for the purposes of this webinar, I should explain what I mean by everything. So to me, that's deadlines. When does the data have to be from the data people? When is the designer asking for copy? When does it need to go to the mail house? When do you want the social graphics done? When do you need your person to update the website? All of those things. Staff assignments, who is in charge of them? You know, I know all of us sit in meetings where, you know, it's discussed that the website needs updated, right? It's discussed that we should come up with some sort of graphic. It's talked about that we really need to talk to a client or get some client photos, right? But you walk out of there, out of the meeting, and you didn't get assigned anything. Nobody really got assigned anything. So you wait, and then a month later you have another meeting and you have the same exact discussion, because nobody was in charge of any of those specific tasks. So put those staff assignments in there so that people know what they're expected to do. We will talk a lot more about this later, but communications. You know, this is not just the mailing timeline. It is your end of year appeal timeline. So put in when print newsletters are scheduled to mail, when you want e-newsletters to go, when you're going to be posting on social media, and when you're going to be updating or doing things on the website. All of those things are a part of your appeal. You know, a lot of people, when they start thinking of their appeal, they just think, who's going to write the letter? What's it going to say? Who's it going to go to? And there's so many more pieces that you really, really need to do to make sure that that appeal is successful. And then also internal tasks. You know, simple things like checking to see if you have enough envelopes, checking to see if you have a nonprofit indicia or a nonprofit permit for mailing, which I know if you were on the webinar 2 weeks ago with Eric from Rapid Mail, he talked a lot about mailing, and if you have an indicia or if you have a permit and all of those things. I found his information to be super helpful because we do a lot of those mailings, and I feel like I ask him the same questions over and over again. But so some of those just internal tasks of, do you have enough envelopes? Checking to see who's going to be signing the letter. You know, all of those types of things that you really might not think of really need to go in this timeline. So as we said, you should have received the template in the mail. If you have not done that, or if you did not download it, please check the chat box now. The next portion of the webinar here really will be working in that template. So if you didn't download it, I feel like you're going to be missing out a little on the fun. So please make sure you get that template now, so that you can follow along. So the template, it looks like this basically. And I know you're going to be like, this seems so simple. Why didn't I think of this? Well, because we did first. So the template, right now we have it starting in August. And I realize it is now September, but while you go through this, you may realize there were a few things you needed to do in August. If you use this as your year-long template, all you have to do is just add more months. You know, I've seen people use this template in lots of different ways. I use it in a lot of different ways, and it may be a couple months, it may be a year, it may be an 8-month template. You know, it really is up to you on how you use that template, because you know, it's an Excel spreadsheet. You can update it, you can move things around. I color code mine sometimes. As we talked about, I love this kind of stuff, so I get a little nerdy about it. But I think the thing to really think about when you're working on this is I always work backward. So anytime I think of deadlines, I start at the last deadline and work backward. Another thing is right now, contact your vendors to get their timelines. If you use a printer, if you use a mail house, if you use a designer, you know, reach out to them now and say, this is when I would like this to be in homes. When do you need these items, so that you can start entering this in? The way I always do it is I work on one type of activity at once. So I will think about, when do I need the mail house information, and fill those in. And then I might move to internal things like checking for postage or checking for envelopes. And then I might think about my marketing and when I want those things to go. So I always focus on one thing. It may be easier for you to do month by month instead, but I just find that if I can focus on one thing, I can really think through exactly what that one thing is before I move on to the next, and just fill in that template as we go.
So Sarah, one comment real quick on that is that the nice part about doing those things individually is the fact that sometimes, like the mailing, for instance, could really impact your printing, and your printing could impact your designer. So as Sarah says, start with the last thing first, and if you do them one by one, sometimes that will completely change what you might think is a realistic timeline and create a little bit more structure for you that you didn't think you had. Because I think a lot of times people think they have more time than they do. And so being able to do that by segment can be very helpful.
Agreed. I also think sometimes too, you can meet with different people for those sections. So if you need to meet with your marketing team, they can fill in the timeline with you as you go, and really figure out what you want to do for the marketing timeline, and then work with, you know, your printing team or your design team or whoever you have. So the other thing that I really think is important, and we talked a little bit about this, is thinking through everything you need. So logos, photos of clients if you need those, letterhead. You know, do you print letterhead? Do you have the whole letter designed? Who needs to approve it, and how long does that normally take? Who's signing it, and do you have those signatures on file? I would assume that you're sending enough letters, you're not going to have anyone hand sign them, but if it's a small number, are people hand signing them? And again, how long is that going to take to get them to those people and get them back? You know, a really good example of that is we worked with a client who never had a development person on staff and hadn't had a marketing person on staff for about a year when this person came on. And one of the first questions we had as we were going through this timeline with her was, what's your logo? Do you have it? Who has your logo? Do you have it in an EPS format so that a designer can use it? What colors are in it? You know, any of those things. She didn't, I mean, she had just started. She didn't have a JPEG of her own logo. She had to find someone on staff that knew where that file was. So I think that's a really good example of sometimes you might not think of, where's the logo? You know, what colors do I give the designer if it's a new designer? Or again, like I said, letterhead, envelopes. Do we need to print more envelopes? All of those things are really, really important and can trip up a really well-laid plan at the very, very end and make your timeline, you know, go off kilter just because you didn't think of those things. And then the last thing I would share before we actually get into the meat and potatoes of filling out the timeline is, you know, make that plan shareable. The whole point of this timeline is not to keep you in a bubble, right? So share updates consistently with the team, put it in a place if you have a shared file system so that people can open it, can update it with their own status updates if they need to. You know, this is a living, breathing, working document. It's not something that you're gonna fill in, save it, and then not touch it again until next year. This really can be updated and touched, you know, throughout this entire process. So hopefully by now, you all will have had your timeline, and hopefully you can see my screen with the timeline, okay? So, as I said, it's pretty simple, the way that we have it laid out, but I am truly a believer in sometimes the simplest things are the best laid plans. So, so the first thing that we would want to do as we start working on our timeline is filling in important dates, right? So we know that the election is November 3rd. So we're going to put in election day, right? That's just a standard. We just know that date. We also know that November 26th is Thanksgiving. And here at .org, we're closed the 27th. So I'm going to put that we're closed. All right. Just so that, again, while I'm thinking through these things, I don't have something planned for the 27th. And then I realize, oh, the entire staff is gone that day. Another date that would be important is going to be Labor Day. Again, offices are closed. And then any days that you have internally. You know, let's say you have an online gala that you're doing one of these days. Hopefully next year we're able to meet in person, so there's an actual gala. So any of those important dates that are going to affect either your mailing time or your internal staff time is important to add. So let's say that we want our mailing to arrive in homes in November. All right, so I'm going to say the week of November 16th because it's after the election, but it's before Thanksgiving. Okay. I will apologize right now if I make typos. I'm actually an excellent typer until people are paying attention. So if I make typos, please forgive. So we've talked to our mail house, right? We've called them and they said it really is going to take us about 3 weeks to, sorry, I'm just going to double check my screen share here. Okay, hopefully that worked. Okay, sorry about that. So, so like I said, we talked to our mail house and they said it's going to take us about 3 weeks. So if we want our mailing in-house on November 16th, we are looking at October 23rd to get all items to mail house, okay? So in this instance, I would be responsible for that, right? And I like to put in type here as well. So this would be, you could put appeal, you could put letter, anything like that, just so that as we go through this and as your timeline gets a little more full, you'll be able to see what pieces go with communications, what pieces go are data, and what's based on the appeal, all of those things. I think you'll see it as we get moving on. Needs here, we are going to print a letter. We are going to create a separate remit, and then we need a number 10 envelope and a number 9 to do as our remit envelope. So those are all the pieces that are going to have to go to the mail house. Okay. And then if I have any notes, I can add them in here. And this is also a place where you can add things as you go. So the mail house also has said that they would love to have the mailing list a week in advance so that they can start deduping and setting up their system, right? So in that instance, then we are going to say that they would like the mailing list October 16th. Again, this is my responsibility, and the needs are really just the list itself. Okay, so do you see how as you move through this, you really are starting to figure out exactly those pieces and parts that need to be done as you're going, right? So you know, and this, for a larger organization, some of this may be easier and some of it may be harder. So data services requires 2 weeks to prepare the list, okay? But you want at least 1 week to look through it because, you know, it's going to be a big list. You want to just make sure that there's no names on there that are weird or funky, or, you know, maybe they missed something when you talk to data. So you want a list to prepare it. All right, so you'd like to receive it by October 9th, but actually data needs it by September 25th. All right, so you're going to request the list from your data services. And who's responsible? That would be your data people. So we'll call him Dave. And this is going to be data. Okay. So, September 25th. That's actually not that far away, right? So you can see as you're going through here how quickly these dates just keep getting closer and closer and closer. So, you know, as we're looking through this, you know, you really need to figure out in the next couple weeks, what information do you need? You know, who are you mailing to? How many segments are you going to have? And start getting that information together so that you can request that list from data services by September 25th in order to have it by October 9th for you to review it, and then to the mail house by October 16th for them to start cleaning it up and running the NCOA and all of those magical things that they do to those lists to make sure the right people get them, right? So then, you know, the basics of this is then you do the same thing for the designer, and you do the same thing for copywriting. You do the same thing for communications, and you do the same thing for the printer. So if, in this instance, the mail house has requested all of the items by October 23rd, and the printer has said, you know, they're swamped in this time frame, they're going to need all of the print materials way before that. So they need at least 3 weeks, right? So now you're looking at September 30th, right, to get all of your items to print. Now, that's not far away. I mean, you're talking 30 days from now where we need to write copy, have it designed, figure out our remit, and get it to a designer so that it gets to the printer. So again, you can see how quickly this can go very, very quickly to the point where you need to get your butt in gear, right? Because end of year is much, much closer than what we thought it was. Are there any questions yet?
Yes, we do actually have a question. So can you talk a little bit more about timing of the letter? So is before Thanksgiving an advantage, so you're early, or more toward mid-December?
I think that is a little bit of a personal preference, and I think Amy can probably have some insight on this as well. My feeling has always been that after Thanksgiving, everything is only about Christmas. So it's Christmas, it's New Year's, it's people taking, 2 weeks off at the end of the year. So my feeling is always that after Thanksgiving, things just get lost. Think about at your own house, how many times mail kind of sits there for a little bit because Thanksgiving's crazy. And for me, my birthday is after Thanksgiving. So then, I have to celebrate the week of my birthday. And then all of a sudden, you're halfway into December. But if your organization has a ton of success by mailing it in December, I don't think there's anything wrong with mailing it, really dependent upon your organization. My biggest things would be, do not send it so that it hits during election time, before election time, because things just get lost with all of the election mailing that we all get. And don't let it hit the week of Thanksgiving, because truly then it will get lost.
So I do have a couple comments about this. In our last webinar that we did with Eric Buola from Rapid Mailing, one of the things that we did discuss was, when should you send something out after the election? And his feeling is to wait to drop it till about a week after the election. I am in agreement with Sarah about actually the mailing component of your year-end appeal. And we really look at the year-end appeal as not just a mailing. So your year-end appeal is a multifaceted, multidimensional approach that includes direct mail. It also includes social media, it includes email marketing, and then even phone calls to your most important donors. So I really think that the mailing portion is really, in my mind and in our research, the kickoff portion of your annual appeal. It is not the only portion of your annual appeal. People will take that annual appeal letter and they will actually put it, if they want to give to your organization, they will put it aside. They may actually not send the appeal letter or the appeal back. They may actually take that appeal as a trigger and then they'll go online and make their gift. Or they'll keep that letter, they'll think about it. They may see your social media component. They may see your email marketing as a follow-up. But I really believe that the direct mail portion should be in mailboxes before Thanksgiving, and the time that you spend between that Thanksgiving time and the end of December is where you're using your electronic and digital communication as much as possible.
Yeah, agreed. I think that Amy made a very good point that I don't know that I hit home enough, is that your end of year appeal is not just a letter. I did talk a little bit about communications, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then we also have another webinar coming up to talk about that specifically. But it really is the entire season of giving. So it is incorporating, if you're interested in using Giving Tuesday, it would be incorporating Giving Tuesday. It would be incorporating your social media messaging, printed newsletters, e-newsletters, board phone calls. All of those things should all be encompassed in your end of year giving timeline. It is not simply sending out a letter. I realize what I've put in here so far is pretty much just about the letter, but it is so much more than that. So I think that's a very good point. So I think at this point, I'll talk a little bit about the messaging tab, only because it's on there and I don't want you guys to think that I'm just going to ignore it. So you will enter communication tasks into the template. So on this side, I may have, no, let's not do September 7th. That's silly. Let's go September 12th. Facebook message, okay? And then on this side, this is where you would be putting in September 12th, and then the actual message, right? So whatever that actual message is that you're sending out, this is where you'll be able to write that copy, include the link if you're going to be using an image. It's going to go on Facebook in this instance, and then any notes that you might add. So those two things will tie together. So those items will also be a part of this timeline, and then we just call out the messages a little differently. We will be talking about that at a separate webinar, so I'm not going to go into this in detail, but that is how this part will be used, so that you don't have to worry about putting in here what you want for your messaging, just in these little squares. You can actually use this messaging tab for that. And then, in a perfect world, if you have a social media manager, they receive this tab, right? And then they know exactly when you'd like things scheduled, what goes into all those pieces. So let me go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so at this point, I just want to go through a quick review of everything we went over. So one of the biggest things is going to be now talking to your vendors and internal staff to figure out your deadlines. I can't stress that enough, that I know it seems like it's so far away, but it really isn't. So please, 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 when you get off this webinar, email your vendors and just double check with them, your printers, your mail houses, your designers, your internal team. Hey, we need to start thinking about this. Can you start giving me some deadlines, right? Adding all of the info into the timeline. Again, if it happens, do it. And if you forgot something, do it. So if at this point right now you're thinking to yourself, oh yeah, you know what, usually in August at our staff meeting, we have a discussion about what client story we're gonna use for the end of year appeal. We didn't have an August staff meeting. I need to do that. Go ahead and put it in August. So that way next year, whenever you open this up, it's there. So you know exactly what you needed to do. Update, 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 and share, share, share. This, again, as I said, it is a living, breathing, moving document. So make sure people are constantly receiving it and able to get into it to see what needs to be done, what they've been missing, what their expectations are. Use this really as a tool. And then I think another thing that's important to talk about is this seems like a lot of work, and I totally understand that. But once you do it, you can use this forever. So, once you've written this out once, yes, obviously it will be tweaked and you're going to be, changing messaging and communication, but the basics of it will be there. So I know it sounds like a lot of work in the beginning, but I can't tell you, and again, I enjoy timelines more than the normal person, but how many times I've been able to go back and follow something I created 2 or 3 years ago, and it took me this much time. It took me this much time to do it the first time, but then it took me this much time to update it, and I was done. I had it. It was ready. And you can impress people with, yep, here it is. And they're like, wow, she did that super quick. Yeah, you did, because you're amazing, and you did it already last year. The other thing that's nice about this timeline too is that it can be used for other things. So you can use it for event timelines. You can use it for printing your annual report. You can use it for creating website updates. I worked with a client a few years ago, and we actually created multiple tabs on this sheet for them of everything. So every event they did had its own tab. Their annual appeals had their own tab. Their websites had their own tab. Their newsletters had their own tab. They actually did a printed newsletter every quarter. All of it had their own tabs. And then these timelines got filled out for every single thing they did. And then I had it populate to one big timeline for the entire year. So they had one huge timeline that was color coded based on events, based on updates, based on appeals, the whole thing. They had their whole year planned out of all of the little tasks that needed to be done. It was truly a success story for me because it was like a nerd timeline stream. We already talked a little bit about the messaging tab, and as I said, mark your calendars now, September 15th, 2 p.m. Amy and Kaylee Stoffinger, one of our other fantastic employees here at .org, will be handling dynamic campaign copy, messaging, how to really put together an appeal that in this time people are going to engage with, and they're really going to be interested in reading, and it's going to move them to actually give, and how to use that theme that you've created in things like your social media, in things like your newsletters, in things like your emails, so that it ties together. I think if you're like me and you watch a certain television station and you see the same commercials over and over again, it's that same idea, that you're going to constantly be bombarded, right, with that same type of idea. So once you see them, you're going to think, oh, that's right, I haven't made my donation yet. I need to do that. So please register now for this September 15th webinar. I think it's going to be really, really helpful to kind of wrap up this entire series that we've done of webinars. So at this point, I know I have bombarded you with information. Most of you are panicking about filling out your timeline and realizing that you don't have enough time to do anything, and I apologize for that, but we are happy to answer any questions you have now. about anything?
Yeah, so there are a couple questions that I have. We actually have a question about the first two series. So yes, we actually have, and actually we do need to upload the last series on mailing on YouTube. And if you go and look for us on the .org Solutions YouTube channel, so you go to YouTube, we don't have a straight URL yet, but you can look for us on YouTube, and those recent webinars actually have been uploaded to that. So that's a good way that you can go and look at those other webinars. We do have a couple other questions that, as you're thinking of things, to ask Sarah. You know, there are some people who are fans of plans and timelines and all this kind of stuff, and then there's some people who don't embrace them as well as others, or find that this kind of technical planning just doesn't really fit their work or learning style. What are some ways that you can take this plan, instead of having it like done and on a shelf, that you can, you know, work with others to make sure that you're interacting on a regular basis to continue to create that accountability and timeline? Do you have any like suggestions on how to do that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing that you can do in those instances would be, and I hate to say more meetings, but I feel like in this world that we're not actually meeting with people as often, it's not as hard. But set up calls, check-in calls. You know, use this template to send it out to people through an email and just say, hey, can you just double check to see where you're at on any of these items if you're on there? I've also seen it where people fill it in on their own. You know, so if you have a marketing or social media person, send it to them and ask them to fill it in their sections. So it's not all on just one person as the keeper of the timeline, to be that only person that touches it.
And also too, you can, you know, put it on your calendar and share any key dates with even an invite. So if you're using a calendar invite or something to do that, or any kind of deadlines in that respect, or if you have any kind of project management software. I know some organizations do have that, some don't, but that just might be an interesting way to go about that. So, all right, so we have, let's see. Sorry, I'm just looking here. Do you have a recommended number of touches with donors and prospects to incorporate into your year-end appeal?
I think that can be tricky. So at one point, I remember there was a number out there that, you know, a donor needs touches between 12 and 16 times before they give. And a touch doesn't mean a letter. It could be they follow you on social media, so they see something you post, they get a newsletter, they get you know, an invite to an event that you've done throughout the year. So there are a few different things that you can do that are some of that, you know, those touches. I think that if you're sending out a mailing, those you can cut down on some of the other touches. If you are not sending out a physical mailing, and if you're only relying on e-newsletters or emails and your social media, I think those you can bump up a little more and use those a little more often, especially your social media. You know, the way social media is now, not everything you post is seen by everyone that follows you. So, you know, using that social media and even posting once a day doesn't mean I'm going to see it once a day. I might see it one time the entire season that you've posted it, depending on who's sharing it and who's commenting on it. And this is a little off topic, but I think it's also important to make sure that during this time period, you're reminding your staff and your board members and your ambassadors, those people closest to you, to like those things, comment on them, share them. You know, as soon as, and I know those of you who have Facebook probably notice this, that the same post is always at the top of your feed. And when you look at it, it's because someone new commented on it. So Facebook thinks you want to see what the new comment was. That works for your organization too. So if you have board members and staff members and people at least liking and commenting, it's going to show up more often in other people's feeds because Facebook thinks it's going to be interesting to you. So I think those, I don't have a specific number, but I really think it matters a little bit of who your donors are and where they are. And using things like social media where they're not seeing it all the time. And if you're switching the messages up, that's the other thing. If you send me the same email every single Tuesday for 3 months asking me to give, that I'm going to delete it after the first couple, right? Because I've read it. I got it. Thank you. So make sure that you're switching those things up. Sometimes a graphic is just enough to say thank you. Have a wonderful holiday season. Please don't forget to make a donation. Use monthly giving is a huge vehicle that a lot of people don't use. Change up your messaging a little to include monthly giving, to include things like sponsorships. So I think as long as you're changing some of those messages, you can touch people a lot more often. It's just, I wouldn't recommend sending 3 letters that say the exact same thing and then sending them an email that was a copy and paste from the letter. That to me would be unsuccessful.
So we are going to talk a lot about messaging in our next session, but really going along with what Sarah has to say, since some of you may be, now that you've looked at your timeline, panicking that you have to get your letter written so you can get it to the designer. I would also say don't overthink it. I do think that we spend a lot of time overthinking the writing of complex appeals. We are trying to have it be in such a way that it has to be this long narrative and this long story. And, I'm all for storytelling, and I think we do need to tell stories, but I also think we need to be concise. We share this statistic a lot, and I'm sure this is even more significant now that all of us are home on a more regular basis, but we're bombarded with more than 3,000 marketing messages a day. And that's just marketing messages. This isn't anything else but marketing messages. So everywhere you look, there's some sort of marketing that's being done to you. And so people are fatigued with reading. They're fatigued with social media. They're disgruntled with social media. So it's about really getting your message across in a concise way. It's about doing what matters as opposed to volume. So, as you're thinking through it, and again, we'll talk about this in a couple of weeks, that, the number of touches isn't important, I think, as the quality of the ones that you put out there. Okay, we have another question. This will be our last question before we wrap up, unless anybody has any that come in here in the next couple of minutes. What are some things that are really some kind of landmines that people need to think about as they put together their timeline? I mean, you talked about a couple about, shoot, I can't find the dreaded EPS file for the designer. Do I have enough envelopes? What are some things, like when you're in the last phases of putting your mailing together and your last phases of putting your timeline together, there are some things you really need to think about now to give yourself the time to work through?
I think one of the first ones would be approvals. Depending on the size of your organization, the approval process may be lengthy for you. So making sure that those pieces that are being designed, that copy that's in those letters, gets to people fast enough so that they have time to approve it, and you're not, knocking on your VP's door saying, did you get a chance to read that? It has to go to print yesterday. So I think that's one thing, is just those types of things. The other thing that I think is something I've learned is things take longer than you think they're going to. So, if it is a matter of you just need to ask someone a simple question about the PMS color in your logo, that might take a couple days for that person to get back to you. And in your mind, oh, good, let me just quick ask them and it'll be done. That may be a longer conversation. So I think some of those things that are just those like, oh my gosh, and then there are going to be things that pop up that you didn't even think of. The other thing most mail houses require the postage to be paid before they mail it. So once you get that invoice from the mail house, make sure that your accounting team is fast enough to cut that check, and you can either hand deliver it, or some of them have different ways of receiving payment for that, but they usually will not send your mailing until that postage is paid in advance, which is something else that can be a last minute, like, crap moment because, you know, you didn't think that through. The other thing that I think sometimes can be a little bit of a pitfall is using client stories. You know, there's always the opportunity or the possibility that using a client story, using a client photo, something may happen, and you're going to have to pull all of that at the last minute. So I would definitely be very, very conscientious of when you're choosing those types of things, either using it as an anonymous story, which the person may be more comfortable using that anyway and using stock photos as opposed to an actual person. I always will vote for a real person and a real person's story and put that person's photo and name on it. I just think as a donor, if you want to get into my heart, I want to see the person. I don't want to read from an anonymous client, you know, XYZ organization changed my life by doing these things. I want to know, I want to feel the personality there, but it can be a pitfall if something would happen and they have a falling out with the organization, or something like that.
And I would also say too, you know, you may have client stories that you ran before in an appeal that they gave permission for. If those people did not give permission for you to splash them all over social media for your appeal for this fall, you need to make sure you're getting the approvals from people that you've done stories on in the past, just to make sure that you are protecting yourselves, because you don't know where people are right now. They may not want to share their story. They may have other hardships or issues that they're working through right now that just make them want to just not be in the public eye. There may have been a situation where they're no longer liking your agency very much for whatever reason. So make sure that you're always getting separate approvals for any story that you're using for people too. And, you know, also too, I wanted to make a comment about social media. You know, make sure too, if you're using social media, and even if you decide to use paid social versus, you know, just organic social, make sure you know who the keeper of your social media accounts are. And also make sure you know who the keeper of all of your website domains and things like that are, because sometimes, especially with small nonprofits, you're working with either a volunteer or an intern or someone who has taken that control and may have done a really wonderful job, but is no longer with you, and you no longer have control of that account. So, you know, make sure that you know who is the owner, quote unquote, of that account, who has administrative rights, and who can make that happen. Because the worst thing you could do is spend all this time drafting a really great annual appeal or year-end appeal timeline and then end up having you know, a problem because you can't execute all the things that you need to execute because you don't have access to those particular vehicles. So, all right, well, we are actually starting to run short on time. And Sarah, do you have any last comments before we wrap things up for today?
You know what, the only thing I would say is don't be afraid to use this how you need to use it. You know, again, as we went through a lot of information and there's a lot of moving pieces and parts, you know, don't feel the need to work on this for 8 hours just to get it done. Work on it as things come to your mind. Work on it, you know, after a meeting that you have that you can fill it in. You know, don't look at it as like, oh my gosh, this is overwhelming, because like you just saw, we did the entire, you know, mail house portion in 10 seconds, right? So just look at it in pieces and parts and don't get overwhelmed.
Well, thank you, Sarah, very much for guiding us through the timeline portion of our series on your year-end appeal. Our next session is 2 weeks from today at 2 o'clock. We're actually going to be talking about drafting the messaging for your annual appeal. So we will actually be talking more in depth about some of the things that we addressed today. And hopefully we'll get you all ready so that when November comes, you're going to have this great mailing that's going to raise you the money that you need for year end. So we will be sending out a survey, so we would love your feedback. And we are also planning for our next quarter webinar series. So any kind of feedback you give us on topics and tips and things like that that may be of interest to you, we would love to have them. So thank you again for coming today. Good luck on your annual appeal. And if any point you're having some additional questions for us, please contact us at .org at info@orgsolutions.com. Thanks and have a great day.